Okay. Oh, let me do my hair. Beautiful. Okay, so it is a different day from when I filmed cranking the engine, so I've got on a different shirt. Don't worry, nothing more magical has happened besides cranking a Honda engine on the stock ECU. So, I wanted to get a little bit of general overview before I tear into this monstrosity and break it down for you guys on the table. What we'll start with is, well, let's start at the ECU main wiring harness connection. So everything behind here is all stock, the intake, everything. I didn't run it with the exhaust, so I don't have the O2 connector. The air fuel is not connected, but it really doesn't need to because it was just a bench test. So ECU harness runs down to the ECU. ECU is plugged in at the, so I'm gonna separate these two by calling this one the engine bay ECU harness, and then this one I'm going to call the interior ECU harness. And so that way it just separates the, it separates the two of them, so that way we don't have any confusion in the future when I'm talking about one of these harnesses. Okay, so this is the hood ECU harness right here, these two, and then this one is also the hood ECU harness. However, this hood ECU hooks up to the interior harness, and it hooks up at this connector. Now, keep in mind, this connector and this female connector hooks up with another male connector spread out somewhere through this harness. So you need to make sure that you note that this is the right connector. If you hook up the other connector, obviously it won't work. It will physically fit in there. It is white, but of course the pins don't work and obviously nothing's gonna run. The same goes to say with the tach. The gauge cluster has another green harness that fits right into the gauge cluster. I made that mistake when I was cranking it. The gauge cluster wouldn't light up, and so I had to diagnose that. Turned out, obviously, I just needed to swap the harness connector, but keep that in mind. Okay, so back down to here. This connects up to interior harness. This is hood harness, and then this is the interior harness right here on this side of the ECU. Now, all of this stuff just goes straight up to the engine, so we're not worried about those connections. What we have to figure out are the fusible connections for this harness and the fusible connections for this harness. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. A couple of other honorable mentions. Ground your ECU. It doesn't say it anywhere in the diagrams that it's necessary to have an ECU grounded, but in my opinion, it's better safe than sorry. Now that is just my opinion. I would suggest that you just slap a ground on your ECU body, so that way you don't have any problems, hopefully. Also, I'm trying to find my general ground bus that I made. Man, this thing is just a monstrosity, and I'm sorry it's just gonna be such a long video, but I'll tell you what, it's better having the video than not. So this is just the general ground that I just took a wire and wrapped it around this whole ground bus and essentially routed it back to the battery, straight to the battery negative. And that is just kind of a shotgun approach at dealing with all the grounds at one time. Probably the majority of those grounds aren't used, but I didn't want to figure that out right now. So like I say, I just shotgun approached it. Couple other honorable mentions are, and I'll talk more about this in the bench video. Actually, the immobilizer. I would not suggest taking the immobilizer physically off of the ignition. I would suggest leaving the immobilizer on the ignition and putting the key in the ignition and physically having the immobilizer chip in line with the position that it needs to be for this immobilizer to read. And it may work for you, but it didn't work for me, not without having this whole immobilizer system just kind of positioning the key in the correct area. So That's another honorable mention. And then a couple of keynotes. The OBD port, I left the OBD port running so that way I had some sort of diagnostics. It didn't work for me the first time, so it turns out that there is a certain pin in here that you have to supply 12 volt constant to. I will talk about that on the bench, where I break down all the diagrams. Another honorable mention, I didn't have the alternator running. So this is the under hood fuse box. This is the under dash fuse box. Again, I'll supply all these diagrams. But this, I didn't even have the alternator running on a serpentine belt physically, which meant that the battery was receiving no charging. And so for the sake of the bench test, I didn't run the power management unit that is put inside of this fuse box that raises the efficiency essentially of the alternator. It only requires as much output as what the battery system or perhaps maybe the headlights or some amp pulling system calls for. This power module says, okay, we're gonna need the alternator to kick it up 15% to supply the headlights, and the alternator does just that. So I would suggest, and I'm personally going to implement this power module in my build, but I don't think it's necessary for race cars. Don't take my word for it. I'm just gonna do it because I'd rather have the efficiency there. But that is an honorable mention, and like I say, for the sake of the bench test, didn't need it. Wasn't charging anyway. It was just all running off of battery power. Also, ooh, yes, this, I had a, my battery charger was on and it would fluctuate between 12 and 14 and a half volts just to get the battery charged. It was just that kind of system. When I had that running, I was hoping that I could fire the engine while I had this as a support, this battery charger. And it didn't like it. Before I cranked it, the vehicle noted that it was above voltage without the engine running. And the PCM basically threw a code into my scan tool and told me it didn't like it. Now, I don't know if that was the reason it wasn't cranking the first couple times I tried it, but I took it off and the immobilizer liked it, it seemed like, and the code went away, more or less. I didn't clear anything, but obviously it went away because the battery stayed at 12 volts. Now, the engine did run after I did that. Maybe if you have that issue, then you'll take a look at taking your charger off if that's something you've done, but another honorable mention. Okay, let's break this monstrosity down and figure out the wiring. Actually, one last thing I forgot to mention before we go over to the bench. This is your brake switch right here, and you can see I have a 12 volt wire running up to the positive post. That is supposed to supply the red and black wire, or sorry, that's not the red and black. It's the white and black wire. That's going to supply the white and black wire with constant 12 volts. So typically it's, I believe, the red wire that wraps around when it goes to the switch as long as the brake is pressed. Oops, whatever. As long as the brake is pressed, then it will deliver the 12 volts over to the white and black wire. And that will tell the ECU, okay, the brake's pressed, we're good to crank, we're good to fire. So I just basically took the 12 volts, routed it straight into that wire. Didn't have to have the switch physically on there. So you're gonna need to do that also. You can leave the switch on there, and with the switch just resting, with the button fully unpressed, because that brake pedal is not resting against that button and pressing it, when that switch is just resting, it will register as the brake being pressed, and the ECU will get its 12 volts that it needs. But like I say, I just took the 12 volts straight to the black and white wire. So we'll talk about more on that on the bench. This is your under dash fuse box. Beautiful. And this is the diagram for the under dash fuse box. And as you can see, we've got a few diagrams to deal with. So let's get the generals out of the way. Here you are. Hopefully you can read that. I got all of this stuff off All Data, and I understand a lot of us don't have access to All Data, so I'm showing you these things right now. Okay, so what do we need from the fuse box? We need connectors. Now, this is the power. This is where you get your power into this box. So you need these three, and I'll tell you what they are in a second, but you need these three to power the majority. And this one powers your injectors. Okay, so that would be the fuses that you need to power are, and these are the fuses in this box. So you can see the numbers across. They're just written right here. I'm not sure if you can see that in the close-up, but you'll see them on your car. You need 2, 4, 7, 18, 19, 20. You can read. And then the connector power is for 2 and 4 is B2, for 7 is B4, and so forth. You can see C2 and whatnot. That would be right here. This would be connector C, connector B, and connector D. And I've given you the colors of, so for instance, B4 is this yellow guy right here. B2, black and red. And so on and so forth. So you just go down the line. Now, I'm still going to give you the connector views because I'm such a great person. So you can see A, B, C, and D. And I hope you can read them. So that's A, B, C, and D. And because I'm so nice, I'm also going to give you everything that you don't need, just in case you are needing that as well. Here we go. I think. Let's see, A, B, C, and D. You need F, E, H, and... Okay, here we go. There are those. Okay, so we got that out of the way. J and K, let's see, so we've got F, E, H, G. You need Q and P. And I've already given you some of these over here. Now, like I say, you can actually just see like that little, I don't know if you can see it so well, but there's an A and you'll see it written above, but it's all there. And let me see. So, yeah, that's kind of the breakdown, the general breakdown. So moving right along, there is P, R, S, Q, and T. Okay. All right, you don't need any of those. At least you don't need them for a bench test. As for the main plugin, you need X. So X is your big boy. That is what connects up a lot of your stuff to the interior harness. This is the connector X. And you just plug that baby in with what I've written right here and just plug it into the harness over there and you're pretty much square. Here's connector N, which would be this guy right here. So here's X, this is N. You really do not need N, as far as I'm aware. The only thing that you need off of connector N is the number 10 if you want to power your OBD. But you don't need to plug it into your actual connector box. All you have to do is just cut the connector itself, the white-green wire, and give it 12-volt power. Of course, you probably want to fuse it, but you just need to deliver it 12-volt power, or you can just connect it right back on the OBD port, and that would be the white and green wire in the corner. So you have two blacks in the middle, and then white and green wire in the corner. It's pin 16. That's going to be your 12-volt power supply for your scan tool. And so you could just power it right at the OBD. And of course, you're going to want to fuse it, but you can, again, just do that right at the OBD. Okay, under hood box. This is the general under hood diagram, and you really won't need any of this with the exception of the alternator, whatever that ELD unit I think is what it's called. It basically, like I said, just manages the power that goes to the car. Now, I'm not going to go into that because frankly I haven't done it myself yet, but as you can see, so this is the project right here. If I want to power the windows on this car, I personally just going to take the battery cable, and because this is a mid-engine car, yes, I'm taking a front-wheel drive engine, putting it in the middle of the engine of this, or the middle of the chassis of this car, transverse, but that's a story for another time. Okay, so I'm taking the main power and I'm bringing it back, and I'm going to connect it up to that Honda supply fuse, so that way the alternator, when it's getting current drawn off of the windows or maybe the headlights from the actual Porsche chassis, then the Honda alternator will change its efficiencies for the draw that is getting loaded for. But that is a story for another time. Right now, we're just worried about the bench test. Okay, so back to the diagrams. These are the breakdowns for the under hood fuse relay box. Now, like I say, I don't use any of these, but I'm going to supply them to you guys just so that you have them. Yeah, a lot of that stuff is pretty straightforward. Here is a, what is this even? Oh, you know what? Yeah, why not? Let's give it to you guys. Everything you need. These are the ECM, PCM inputs and outputs at connectors. So actually we're starting with E here. First of all, let me get you guys a actual, never mind, I don't have a breakdown of what ECU connector is which, but I hope you guys can find it online or generally just be able to match it according to the general shape of this connector right here and the wire colors that are coming off of it. So there's connector A, connector B. Like I say, you won't need a lot of this, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. I guess connector A again. What the heck is going on? Oh, wait. Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna have to probably redo this bit of the video. Screw it, we'll do it in one take. There's the first half of connector A. There's the second half of connector A. So we got that out of the way. Connector B. Connector E. And you're probably like, what the heck happened to connectors freaking C and D? And that's because those are for the automatic transmission. And I don't have an automatic transmission. And if you're doing this on an automatic transmission, good luck to you, because this is not a comprehensive breakdown of bench testing and automatic trans PCM. I don't even want to deal with that problem. So when I say good luck to you, I really mean it. All right, now for the ECU wiring diagram. This is where the fun begins. Okay. Now I really hope you can read all of this, because this is invaluable information. And it's going to be really hard to track all of this, so I really hope that you have, all data, but if you don't, then hit pause on the video. Generally, if you just follow along to what I'm saying, as long as our years, the years of cars and our VINs and stuff generally match, you shouldn't be needing this as long as you are following along to the fuse body breakdown. But just in case. Now this is the immobilizer actually, so you can see the immobilizer unit right here. This is not a part of these diagrams. This is a further breakdown of the immobilizer, just in case you're having problems with it. And my bet is that you will, but hopefully you don't. Now, as far as the fuel pump goes, you probably noticed in the breakdown on the fuel pump, I didn't have my fuel pump actually over here or connected. First of all, it's because it stinks at the shop and I didn't want to deal with all that. So I just took it outside. But I hooked it up directly to the fuel rail right here. It's actually where that blue towel is. And I just ran it down to a bucket and I powered it off of the battery. You could power it off of a power pack. I personally did a power pack. Doesn't matter. It's technically a separate system. And this system does not involve the fuel pump, because it's advisable that you power the fuel pump manually with some sort of switch, relay, some separate relay, and you just don't have the ECU powering the fuel pump. Because it's not a duty cycle fuel pump, it's just a constant running fuel pump. It doesn't even have a return line on this engine, so I actually have to do that for this car. But again, that's a separate mechanical video, not so much an electrical wiring video. I think I got everything. I think there was one honorable mention that I wanted. Oh yes, the starter. Last but not least, cranking the starter. So these are your under hood fuse box power terminals. You don't need to have them hooked up unless you're running the ELD. But like I say, we're bypassing a lot of this fuse box just by powering the under dash fuse box directly. And then this bad boy, that is your starter power. So I hooked up this start switch, wherever the heck it went. I hooked up this clamp. I just shoved it in there. It actually fell off in the beginning. You might have saw that. And then I just had this button and crank, and that just cranks like a typical starter power. So I had the one connected right here, and then the other cord was connected up to the positive power right here. And Bob was my uncle. Not to mention the grounds. You see these cables up here? The grounds I have, this is the ground side right here. Just jumper cables hooking up the grounds to the block in a couple of locations. I hooked it low right here so the starter would have a high ground to jump off of. And then I hooked it high up here because this is actually one of the main grounds that supports the ECU, and you don't want to blow that. Definitely don't want to blow that. So put your ground as close to that ground location as you can. Okay, did I get it all? I hope I did. I hope you guys get to see this hoe running in a couple of weeks. It would be very fun. But that's not really the scope of today. I think we covered everything. Toss some comments in the comment section. Ask me some questions if you need some help. Hopefully I can throw some diagrams your way if you do. And well, I really think I think I covered everything. So good luck to you. Take care. And of course, I've got one more thing. It wouldn't be a video without throwing a PS in. Just had to make sure I was in the right zoom. Of course, I've got one more thing. So you probably saw in the beginning of the video, I pulled a wire off to cut the engine. That was this guy right here. This is the injector And the honorable mention is you saw it goes up to fuse 23 on my needed fuses diagram. 23 white and green. Shebang powers the fuel injectors. However, you will not have continuity from this green wire to fuse 23 directly. Why? Because in order for this to receive power, this has to first be receiving power, and it will power the F1 main relay, which will then open a direct contact to the fuse 23, I believe. I hope I'm saying that right. I probably botched it. It's probably not exactly that. But as far as I'm aware, that's my understanding of it. So just be advised, this is kind of a magical wire. Whoops. This is kind of a magical wire. And this, in my opinion, is what you should be using to cut the engine off. So that was the last thing.